welcome to the October Community of Human and Organizational Learning webinar. And today, so this is Dean Smith from the organization, a little bit of introduction there. I am thrilled to introduce Ron Ferris, who's going to talk about scalability and sustainability and how critical they are for success related to HOP implementation. And Ron, as you probably saw on the webinar advertisement on the website, has a great background in this field. And one of the things that I love, besides everything Ron's done in reading about him, is his background in the U.S. Nuclear Navy program, because I know that creates a lot of interesting challenges and a lot of great insights and learning that, Ron, I know you've applied over the years. So that's my brief introduction. And Ron, just welcome, and the floor is yours.
Okay, well, appreciate it, Dean, and I really do appreciate getting the opportunity to speak to all of you today. I hope you find this insightful. We're going to try to use some information that my partners I, Ray Gonzalez and Daniel Wilder, learned over the years of implementing humanization performance to a variety of organizations, both large and small. And I think it's important to share our lessons that we all have from this industry and what we're trying to do to help folks reduce, the accidents and events that occur in these places. So most of the time we're caught up in this reactive mode, unfortunately, when we deal with HOP. And I think it's important to be proactive. And I'm going to talk about some proactive activities and things that we've learned that are very helpful in implementation, and some lessons learned, and actually show you a real example of what that looks like. And then at the end, I'll give you a quick summary of the 3 key points that I think you need to walk away with. And I hope that as I progress through this, if you do have questions, please do ask them. Likely I will answer it later on, but more than happy to answer it at the time it comes to mind, because I think it's important that we address it when it does. So hopefully you can ask those questions as we progress, and Dean will be helping me moderate that information, as well as Bob. So one of the things we've learned is that scalability and sustainability of the program, that HOP process, getting these principles and practices out in the field, they really are key to full adoption, and that success has to include these 2 things. And how do you do them? And I'll tell you, having been the human performance manager at Idaho National Lab with over 5,500 people, diverse organizations, and trying to get this out there, these 2 things stood in my way and really hampered my ability to be successful in the way that I wanted to be. And I'm so thankful that I've got the partners I do, and high reliability partners now, to actually be able to do this and help organizations. And we're doing it all across North America. And I'll tell you, it's important that you folks consider how this might help you as well. So a couple of the challenges to implementation I think that are important to recognize is, first, I'm going to talk a little bit about this ability to deploy training and get this buy-in from senior management and addressing the performance gaps. And the second part is this challenge that often comes is this piecemeal approach to the training itself, both in the consistency and content, the quality, and even how we deliver this information. I have seen this to be a big challenge for folks. A lot of people come in, they're looking for a silver bullet. They try this, they try that. And unfortunately, those failures set you up for further failures because you didn't get the win. And we'll talk about a first win and how that can change things for you. And I'll be very specific about what that first win can look like for any of you, those that haven't deployed yet or are looking to redeploy the opportunities with HOP. So I want to start with the first subject that I wanted to talk about today, and that's the challenges to scalability. And what I mean by that is, scalability has always been one of those things, is how do I get this out to all the people fast enough to change the culture, to change the way people think? So we always say we've got to think people into acting differently. Well, we can't do that if we're in this state of chasing it, if you would, with classroom training, traditional classroom training. In fact, it typically gets in our way. And what that challenge is you've got one instructor, maybe 2, you've got hundreds, if not thousands of people, and you're trying to get everybody to move together as a herd Well, you can't do that with traditional training, in my opinion, and it's gotten in the way. And I've been there. I've taught thousands of people in the classroom setting, but I know how long it takes and the resources and those things. So some of the things that classroom training that distinctly gets in our way of scalability is it's rigid and it's not flexible. It prevents us to accommodate these workers' schedule. So we're trying to get people that are getting the things done, producing the things that we need the company to have as a product or a service, and we're pulling them out of that work activity and trying to shove them into some sort of schedule to take the courses. That in itself creates some very distinct issues, and we'll talk about how to actually address those. The other, it's very demanding. You at both ends, you've got to schedule the classes. You've got to make sure you got qualified and proficient instructors. How do you keep those folks? You get an instructor that gets sick, someone that can't help you. And then you got to have someone step in. They're not polished. They're not ready. There's a whole bunch of things that happen. And some of the things I've seen with some of the big organizations I've gone to do work with is they'll schedule the class. They end up double booking the room. Somebody has to take over. Usually whoever senior gets the space. Now you've got to reschedule it. You mess with people's schedule. You took them out of work. Now you got to put them back into work. They missed the morning meetings. It's a mess, and it's costly in a variety of ways. The other one is it's extremely slow to deliver this content to close the performance gaps. And what I mean by that is we often go in, and what we typically do is we want to know what you're doing well and where your gaps lie. We want to close those gaps with this training that we provide. Well, the problem with this old process is closing those performance gaps cannot be done quickly. You've still got to run all those people through the mill and run them through the classroom training. With video-based training, the approach I'm going to propose to you, you can immediately deploy that information, put it in the context that you want, and get the performance change. So we'll talk about this way to address this. A couple of the other things that I think are key here: classroom training has an effect on cost and efficiency and time, and that it truly lacks scalability, like I just talked about. It lacks the ability to rapidly deploy without providing excessive resources. And what I mean by that, I've seen organizations try to bring 500 people into an auditorium and then dip them all in the sauce and hope it's stuck. Well, you know the challenges with that. You don't have interactions. You can't understand whether everybody got it. And 500 people leave there going, I don't know why I came, because they weren't immersed in the training. The other thing is if you try to put 6, 8, 10 trainers out there, are you getting the right people? Do they have the right background? Do they have the right information? Can they deploy this information? And you try to run multiple classes. Well, you still have a company to run. So you're still challenged in this, where do you make that perfect fit associated with this big logistical issues? It creates complexity also and financial burdens. And what I mean by that is very, very costly to bring in someone like ourselves or even yourselves and put you in a classroom, and then you got all the folks that are not working and producing. So there's financial burdens associated that can be addressed in other ways, and we'll talk about those. And the last part I really want to talk about on this, the challenge with classrooms, is the quality delivery. As you know, if you bring in 3 instructors and you go watch them, there's going to be an inconsistency in the delivery of the content. It's based on their experience, their knowledge, and what they have. And that in itself changes the message. It changes the experience and what the student walks away with. And the other part is there's a logistical challenge. You got to set up, you got to take down, maintaining the physical classroom. Sometimes you want to keep posters and things in the classroom so that we can continually use it. Well, that classroom isn't dedicated necessarily. So that creates some logistical challenges. The other part is this makeup. So schedule 100 people and 90 show up. Then we got 10 and 6 show up. And then you got 4, and it just goes on and on and on. So you end up in that space. And when you start talking about thousands of people, this becomes even more complex and even a bigger issue. So the other part I want to talk about here is this idea of, once it's deployed, is how do you monitor and evaluate this information? Tracking the progress of a large number of employees is a manual effort. We have to shove it through the system. We have to keep track of it. We have to manually do. There's typically no automation associated or limited automation. So how do we do that? And evaluating their progress as individuals is extremely large in a large classroom setting of 25, 30 people. How do you monitor and evaluate that individual's knowledge, understanding, proficiency, that sort of thing? The other thing is, as organizations get real-time insights from the training itself, how do you how do you take that information and deploy it to the folks that have already had the courses, and how do you make sure the folks that are about to take the courses get that information? That real-time insight is a big challenge with standard classroom training. The other thing is emerging issues typically are always evolving in organizations. We're not static. And as that information comes in, there's a lack of mechanisms to adapt the training itself. So quite often I go places and they say, first thing that they tell me I have to tell the folks is, hey, we want your feedback, and your feedback for the training, we'll make changes and this, that, and the other. And they never do. I don't know why they even have me say it. They never change the training. They just tell me, keep on teaching it. And we get all this information from the student. We find out things and we don't make adjustments. Well, that's a problem. And that adaptation can be addressed in other ways. And we'll talk about that. So there's a customization and integration challenge component too. And what it is typically when we deploy HOP, we create a one size fits none approach. And what I mean by that is every organization has different needs, and those needs are driven by the organization's demographics, the work they do, how they do it, what schedules they work, what information is important to them. But we put them in the classroom and we hope that what we're going to teach them is going to work. But we end up putting typically a mix of folks in the classroom. So if you, just as an example, give all kinds of operational examples of maintenance folks go to sleep or social loaf, or if you're in there giving that information to folks that work in the civil organization, maintaining the facilities or dealing with the other aspects of facility operations, they don't care. If you go down the radiological control world, if you're in a nuclear power plant, then everybody else is going to sleep. So that challenge exists. How do you deal with that? And the classroom setting is very challenging to do that. Otherwise, as an instructor, what you find is you're trying to give so many different examples, you spend a tremendous amount of time just on one subject and you can't move on. And unfortunately, sometimes it prevents you from getting all the information out. So we'll talk about how to address that as well. And the other thing is organizations typically have some very distinct things that they want to be integrated into the training. And as HOP consultants, when we go out and teach these classes, we often overlook it because we have this off-the-shelf training. Hey, look, this works. This is what's going to be best. I know you guys got some stuff you want to get in there, but we'll try our best. And typically what you do is you have some senior leader come in and give some perspective. Well, they don't always make it. You got inconsistency in the messaging. How do you integrate that into the information? And I think that's important is how do you do that? We've got a way to overcome that. So I'm going to shift on this one and talk about a proven solution. And this has been working for us. Ray Gonzalez and I teamed up with Daniel Wilder over 3 years ago to start a company called High Reliability Training, which is a subsidiary of High Reliability Partners. And we went down the video-based training path because of COVID and other needs. And we found this as a need, but we never had the time. You're so busy working that you don't have time to build content. Well, now we have an entire video library of solutions that I think are very important. I'm not here to sell you on those concepts. I just want you to recognize that we've got years of experience now in this, and Daniel has many years of experience doing this type of training as well. And I'm going to give you an example of that here in a minute, so you got some sense of what I'm talking about. So often I'm out and folks conflate the concept of video-based training and computer-based training. They are distinctly not the same thing. And as many of you know, and having come from the government, working under the Department of Energy, I would tell you, computer-based training to me was like eating sand. It was horrible. It drove me crazy. I couldn't stand it. I would click through it to get quickly. And if I could just go to the exam and test out, I would. The material just drove me crazy. It was just never in the adult learning span. It was just a bunch of read and understand, read and understand, read and understand, and just regurgitation. And it wasn't helpful. So, I think about it this way, just like the idea of people say, "Oh, we got to coach them." Well, and you hear them say, "Did you coach that person? You saw this," and we mix those things up, and it's got a bad connotation. So I'm going to hopefully change your idea about online training, not computer-based training, but online training in a video-based format. And what I mean by that, lastly, is you guys probably well know, if you ask folks, they often say, "Hey, this training's boring. It's just a bunch of talking heads." So I've seen a lot of folks in other industries say, "Hey, we've got video-based training, and what you got is either a PowerPoint running behind the individual and a talking head, or you got a whiteboard and a talking head." And it's much like what I'm doing here right now. And that is not an engaging process as much as I would hope it be. And hopefully that you're getting a little more engaged here, but it is a big challenge for us. So the other thing is you quite often see a bunch of static information, this PowerPoint slides. Basically, you're clicking your way through that information. And some folks said, "Oh, no, we've got video-based training." And what they really say is they've got a PowerPoint slide deck with some videos embedded. And these videos, I'm working for a big company right now up in Canada. And I'm telling you, these videos I've watched that they have, some are 30 and 40 years old. They're painful to watch, extremely grainy, out of date, bad sound, out of date information. It's like, wow, okay, I guess this is what we're going to use and hopefully change people's minds and behaviors. But it doesn't. And so we're going to talk about how to do that differently. So let me give you an opportunity to think about something different, an alternative solution, and that scalability that video-based training brings to you. So I want to show you how it's different than your basic CBT. And I'm going to show you a quick example. And this is not a sales pitch. This is just to show you what it looks like. But I want you to recognize when you see this little short clip that this is basically what video-based training looks like. The folks would take some information, we would present it, and then we will test for understanding after about 5 to 7 minutes, basic learning. We can't maintain our attention much longer than that. I actually hope in the video itself actually get your attention back in case you're starting to wander mentally. And the idea is that we test periodically through the process, and then we retest it at the end on the key points. And folks can't move on without it. The other thing is with video-based training, our software solution doesn't allow people to fast forward. And many folks do that. In fact, we just had a student at one of our places where we're deploying this say, "Hey, I can't fast forward. What's wrong with this system?" It just made me laugh because it's designed not to let you fast forward. We're not wanting you to. We want you to, you don't know this information. How do you think you're going to fast forward? They think just that's the way out. It's not the way the systems are designed. So here's a quick clip. This is just something so you get a sense of what this looks like and what the feel of it is for the student, and then we'll talk about it.
Peer checking. Peer checking involves close monitoring of a performer's actions by a second, technically competent and knowledgeable person who is prepared to catch and avoid a loss of control by the performer. This tool takes advantage of a fresh set of eyes, not distracted by the performer's primary task. A peer may see things the performer does not see. Before performing a critical step, the performer and the peer should agree that the action to be performed is the correct action on the correct component with the right preconditions. Peer checking augments self-checking, but does not replace it. Peer checking is also relevant for risk-important actions that could create hidden preconditions for critical steps that cannot be verified later.
So hopefully you guys got a feel for what we were talking about there. And I want you to recognize I'm not trying to sell you on what we have. If you have in-house capabilities, you have other organizations that can help you with this, The idea is to provide you some information on what's worked for us. And we've developed a whole bunch of courses, and we put it in a distinct order, and we help folks do that so that we can get that information out. You may have the in-house capabilities to do it. If you do, make this as relevant as you can for the folks and immerse them in the training. So we'll talk about some of the key aspects of what this does for you. And I think this is important to take away if you go down this path and think about how do you build your own video-based training, or if you employ some organization to come help you do that. So first off, and you guys all know this, we lost kind of the human connection through COVID. It was a big challenge for many of us. Luckily, I lived in Idaho and I did not. But folks, I'm telling you, the human connection that video-based training brings to the employee is important. People resonate with it. They can picture themselves doing it. They can picture themselves in the act of whatever we're talking about. So we try to make it as relevant. And in fact, we try to use and work with the organization to get some of their own footage along with our stock footage to put that information into perspective for the particular organization, because people need to resonate with it. They also like the idea, especially when it comes to concepts and principles, is that, wow, this doesn't just apply to me in work. It applies to me in other areas, or it might apply to in general. As we all know, HOP is cross-cutting, and they like to see that, but they also like to see their folks in this. So I hope you find that to be useful. The other thing is they learn much faster and they have a better retention rate. We're visual by nature, and yet we turn around and tell people to read a bunch of stuff. Oh, hopefully you can picture this. Well, the challenge is, even if you throw in a picture and you have some words on a screen, it's not enough. And I've taken training to get into many facilities across the country, up in Canada and the US, and most of it is visual, just some little picture, and I'm supposed to picture what I'm supposed to learn. And I'm telling you, a day later, I don't remember what you tried to teach me. So the visualization itself dramatically increases our retention and understanding because we're visual by nature. The other thing is we got to think about these adult learning techniques, and part of that comes in with this ability to check for understanding. And we check that all along the way, about, like I said, every 5 to 7 minutes. And that's important because our ability to stay focused is limited just by our human nature. So about every 5 to 7 minutes, we want to test for an understanding. It brings people back to say, oh yeah, that's what I was learning here. And then we progress on through. The other thing is that video-based training provides a huge reduction in logistical challenges and costs. And from a makeup standpoint, it's almost a no never mind, because you don't have makeup classes. The folks are able to just basically say, I'm going to take this when I can. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. The other thing is tracking analytics is automated. And we're able to also test the learner's comprehension and their specific needs. They give us feedback. And I'll tell you, in a large classroom setting, doing many, many classes, hundreds of them with thousands of folks, if you think that you understand the comprehension level of all those folks walking out, you don't. There's no way you can. Even if you give an exam at the end during the class, what the monitoring we're able to do with this process, it is so user specific. We get their feedback, we get their challenges, we understand how many times they had to retake the exam, or if they didn't pass the interactions. That sort of information is very, very powerful, because it either tells us we need to make adjustments to the training, or we have an individual needs some specific needs. And in many cases, it could be a combination of both. The other thing is this customization. It really allows us to easily tailor to a specific learner group. So you could come in and say, hey, we're gonna give information on a particular subject, but then take and say, okay, we're going to carve this out for 4 distinct major organizations at the facility and make some adoption of different information so it resonates better with that particular organization. You're going to increase the probability of success there like tenfold And it reduces, if you're in a classroom setting like I talked about, you're going to have to give so many examples, and then you start losing everybody when you go down the rabbit hole of a particular example that's only related to a particular work group. The other thing is that it allows us to match that very specific need. So some organizations need certain things, other organizations don't need it. And quite often, like I said earlier, it's that one size fits none. And the other thing is, because we're able to deploy this in a very rapid way, it gets rid of the performance bottlenecks. In other words, you're able to get all this out there very, very quickly. And we've deployed thousands of people in just a week or so. It's typically not associated with our software system. It's typically their internal software and how much it can handle, their bandwidth, and less so with what we can provide. So it is one of those things that could create a challenge for you as your own internal, and just recognize that can create some issues. But the performance bottlenecks that typically occur due to classroom training is almost completely eliminated with this process. So how do we meet this? Yeah, go ahead.
Can I interject with a quick question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mike asked a question about the knowledge check, and I'll paraphrase here, but is there some component of that essentially tracks where multiple students or an array of students are not answering correctly, if you will, so you can address delivery needs or content needs?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times what we do, let's say we got a question that's being missed by multiple folks, we'll go back and say, we're not delivering this right, or we posed this question wrong. And it's typically on us, honestly. It's not the student. And what you found is, as the developer, you've done something that set them up for failure. And then sometimes it is the student themselves. So if it's a low number, it's likely on the student. It's a high number, it's likely on us. So that's one of the things we've had. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dean. Appreciate the question. So one of the things for scalability is that we're challenged because many of us work in organizations that are very diverse. The workforce is dispersed. They do a variety of different things. And how do you get this information? How do you roll it out efficiently and in a timely manner to all the various physical locations? And I'll tell you, that's a challenge. I mean, we bring people back in from the field that are field deployed employees who don't actually typically come to even to an office. They get up, they go somewhere, they get in their truck, they have a tailboard, and out they go. How do you bring this information to them in a classroom setting? Well, you basically got to pull them out of the work setting. Now you've created a gap. You've set them up for a potential, even for a failure, because of a resource limitation. So there's some answers to that. And then one of the things that video-based training does is it helps you with that scalability and its challenge. So this effective online video-based training approach gives you the ability to do mass deployment. So you can simultaneously put this information out to hundreds, if not even thousands of workers simultaneously. And I'll tell you, this is one of my biggest challenges when I was human performance manager is I wanted everybody to be on the same page very quickly. And it may be a 6-month to 1 year deployment in a classroom rollout. Well, how do you get everybody on the same page? In fact, after the 1 year, you're in refresher mode for the folks that went through it the first time, and you're already begun to have a huge knowledge loss before you got into it. Or let's say you rolled it out to operations and maintenance hasn't had it yet. Well, we can't do this. Maintenance doesn't understand it yet. So we can't. And so you're in this constant, chase your tail mode when you're deploying this information. So I think that the scalability associated with video-based training, getting that content out there, the same message, consistent message, is a huge win for video-based training. The other thing is we found both the direct and indirect costs are greatly reduced. When you start looking at the cost for an instructor, for workers not being in the field, the production coming to some sort of standstill or limited because your resources have been pulled from the field, you got to set up a classroom, you've got to get all this stuff together, you've got to put up name tents, and you've got to do all this stuff and print all these posters, do all this stuff. Well, those are huge costs, and video-based training literally eliminates those. The other thing we always provide is we provide an overview, a handout that goes over the key information so these folks can download that information along with something we provide with every course, a list uh, of definitions of HOP. And that's a huge list that we have. It's very comprehensive because we've got to speak the same language. And that gets to be a challenge. And so we make both of those things available to our students when they take this training. Don't forget that if you deploy this and go down this route as well. The other thing is that if the training and the software platform it resides on is flexible enough, it should be able to be used on any device. So let's say you got a deployed worker. Every one of us have one of these things, and we carry them everywhere we go. You can watch this training on your phone. You can hear it, you can see it, you can take the interactions, you can take the exam all on that device. So we can't say, I don't know anybody that doesn't own a phone. Even my 85-year-old mother has a phone. So we know workers have the ability, they either have a tablet or a phone or something that they can take on this device. And in fact, we have a solution that allows them, even if they don't have connectivity, to take the training and then download the information gets pulled once they get back in and have connectivity. So I think that's important to recognize. So remember that if you develop your own. The other thing is this consistency in content delivery. The message and the material are done in a uniform way. And like I talked about earlier, if you've got 3, 4, 5 different instructors, you're going to have as many ways this information is delivered by the number of instructors that you have. And it doesn't matter, if you think, well, we've all been through the same training, we've all done the same lessons, we're ready to go teach this, we're still going to go out there and give a slightly different message. And that consistency is an extremely important part, especially if you want everybody on the same page. Lastly, on this slide, I want to talk about efficient content updates. So the other thing that you end up with is if you have evolving needs associated with HOP or industry standards or even regulatory requirements, putting everybody back in the classroom and trying to embed that into the right place where that was can be extremely challenging. With video-based training, you can do an update, push that out, and maybe even do a small segment to those that have already taken it, and then push it out in the right location at the right time for the new folks that are taking it, so it's embedded in the training in the right context. So there's 2 ways to address that piece. Just think about that if you go down this route as well, as how do you put out that information in a very timely manner. So before I get into sustainability, I just want to put it out. Has anybody got any questions on scalability and the solutions that I brought forward?
Yeah, so Mike posed another one, and I had a similar question, Ron, and it was about,
Sure.
So again, to paraphrase, the shared experience, like the synchronous activities that help people share stories, share experiences, and learn together. Do you ever build in, that kind of a hybrid model, like, where you do an asynchronous activity and then a synchronous activity?
Yeah, so what we have done, there's a couple things, and I'll tell you how we've done them. One that we've supported and one that the organization's done. So one is they'll take the training and then they'll have us come in and we'll do kind of a quick refresher, and we'll put people in a particular organization in the space, and we'll have a quick refresher. They'll have their management, supervisors, leaders in the room, and we'll put it in the context of you've had this training now, let's talk about it. How does this work? We've recently had this event, or we're currently doing this initiative, and how does that apply to that? So we have done that model. The other one is some organizations will take and utilize our training, and then they will have a meeting with their supervisors who touch everybody. And they said, this is how we want you to go about this. And those supervisors touch everybody, and they have a conversation that you just took this training. Now let's talk about how this applies. And they have the meeting. That becomes much more scalable than shoving everybody back in the classroom. We offer both, and we'll support them in their development of the message for the internal. And if they want to do it themselves, that's fine as well. Obviously, we're very flexible that way. And we've done the other. Now, we've had success with both. I think both are alternatives. It just depends on the subject And the scalability, how large is the organization? What do they want to do? And how fast do they want to get it out? The answer always, it depends. So you had one other as well, Dean?
Yeah, and Phil has a hand raised. So Phil, go ahead and unmute yourself, and what's your question or comment?
So yeah, hello Ron.
Hi,
Thanks
Phil.
for this. I'm a little bit torn at the moment because the little video that you showed was clearly able to demonstrate the use of error prevention tools, but HOP is much bigger, much wider than that. How do you use it to identify or to teach the principles of such things as the gap between work as imagined and work as done, or procedural use and worker variability, which are really very, very important parts of human and organizational performance?
Yeah, Phil, that's a great question. So we highly recommend that folks start with the basic fundamentals and include the principles. And I prescribe to Tony Machera's work in his risk-based thinking book. I co-authored with Tony on critical steps. I hope you guys have read that book. I'm getting my pitch in, but I'm just teasing. But Phil, what we do is we say, hey, it's important we understand the principles of human performance before we develop going into the tools. But here's the thing that for us, quite often we'll come into an organization that said, hey, we've had human performance. We've been doing this for 10 years, 20 years even. Well, they may not want to go down the route of putting everybody through fundamentals because they say, hey, we teach that. We've been teaching classes. We just need a good understanding of peer checking or concurrent verification or procedure use and adherence, whatever that might be. We offer that as well, where we have a comprehensive course that takes them through all the fundamentals tools. There's about 8 fundamental tools that we prescribe to, and then we have a next level tool. We got them for work knowledge workers, and then on the fundamentals, we, depending on what level of the organization you are, we have a kind of a level 1 fundamentals that we think everybody should have. We have a level 2 that's kind of the manager supervisor. And then we have level 3, which is an advanced level. We're working on those other levels. It takes time, as you can imagine, putting it in this format. But we have a pretty extensive library. I will tell you, it's taken time. We're 3 years into it. We developed a proprietary training first because we wanted to make sure that we had that out there first so that folks could get that information that's much different than everybody else. Because a lot of times folks have had fundamentals, they've had tools, and a variety of other things. We wanted to make that offering first. And now we've backtracked and said, okay, we got to put fundamentals in place. We got to get the tools in place and those things. So it's a great question. So the answer always is it depends. And if it depends on what your level of knowledge is, you may not want to take a level 1 fundamentals. You say, I understand all these things. I want to take level 2. So you may want to get in there and start to understand the concept of adaptive capacity as an example, and closing the gap between work as imagined as work as done. That's a prime example. That's a subject that's near and dear to my heart. So it depends on how we go with that. Did I answer your question, Phil?
Sort of. It gave me another bit of conflict in there, really, which is, so I've been working I'm in the nuclear industry, and I've been in there for a long, long time. I've been working as an advisor for what was the human performance working group, industry working group, and it's now called the Human and Organizational Performance Working Group. And all the challenges that you put up front are really, really so relevant, because what is clear is that the nuclear industry, other industries may be different, but the nuclear industry has such a lot to change, because we focus on that small 5% of errors that are created by workers, or traditionally called human performance, rather than on that massive bank of human errors which are influenced by the organizational factors. And that's the way that the nuclear industry is going. And I'm just trying to figure out in my head, how can we deal with the challenges to sustainability at that scale? And I'm not sure that you've got that far yet, to be honest.
Well, we are actually working with the organizations that's actually in the thousands, and they are a nuclear organization. And we were able to get that scalability. We've had immediate wins. We've already changed the culture. We've had immediate success. The message is out there. It's very positive, and they're taking a very systematic approach. And I would tell you, it is doable, it is scalable, and it becomes very sustainable. So that's one of the biggest reasons I wanted to share this is we've actually had success. And Phil, I apologize for, I've got limited time, but I hope I answer that question. If not, please email me, connect with me, and I'm more than happy to share even more details because the nuclear industry is near and dear to my heart. I've worked in it most of my life. So I hopefully we can keep on having that discussion if you'd like to. Is that all right?
Yes, yes,
All
certainly,
right.
Ron.
Thank
I'd
you,
love,
sir.
love that. Yeah, thank you.
You bet. So let's talk about sustainability. I think this is an important one. I've only got about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to probably talk a little faster than I normally do, and I do talk fast. So, I think, like Phil just talked about, is how do we close this gap with the benefits of HOP challenges and actually putting them in practice? So, some of the big challenges, and all of you know this, for sustainability is there's a resistance to change. People don't necessarily adopt it. And part of that comes with this staggered approach of getting that information out there. You can't get everybody on the team to go towards the finish line. You've got people in different phases. Well, with video-based training, you're able to do that. And I want to show you another way to do it as well. And the other challenge is this integration. How do you integrate it? How do you put it in and make it not just a bolt-on, but how do you embed it into your processes? I think that's a big challenge. The resource constraints, as we all know, we've only got so much time in the day. And as a human performance manager, I would tell you, I was always trying to be proactive, but I tended to get to work and put on my turnout gear and go put out fires. That was just the nature of the work. And senior managers is going to call on you, and you end up chasing the stuff that they think is important. This other stuff gets put on hold or put on the back burner. Also, quite often, the training's piecemeal. It's not adequate. It lacks the right understanding. We can't test for it. Its applicability to the organization. That's been a problem. The other is the shifting priorities. You see it quite often. The winds shift in your organization, and they'll say, we need to focus on this. Well, when you put video-based training into place and you put them on a pattern, you can make sure that momentum is not lost. But if you're teaching classrooms and you got to stop the classroom training because that org's got to respond to something, or the instructor's got to respond to it, all those things get in your way. The other challenge that you get is what KPIs do you have? What are your performance indicators? And we've got some good solutions to this, but they affect your ability to have sustainability. Management wants to know what's changing. How is it changing? We'll talk about that. The others, there's this complacency, and it leads to a big decline in your HOP efforts, and that comes from the staggered approach or trying to get it out in a piecemeal way. The others, there's this cultural resistance, both micro and macro, that HOP doesn't apply to us. Well, it doesn't apply, and people start talking about it, and some people don't know it. But when you get everybody on the same page and understanding, you change the minds, change the way they think, you're going to change the way they act. And we'll talk about a first win and how that can help you. And the other part is this feedback loop. How do you know that the change is occurring? How do you know continuous improvements occurring? And it's impeded by this ability. So let's talk about some solutions here. And I hope you find this very insightful. Many of you probably already know this, but your senior leaders have to have a strong buy-in, and they have to have consistent reinforcement of the standards and expectations associated with HOP. And if you don't have that, folks, I'm telling you, you got a recipe for failure. You're not going to get there without this. If you're pushing from the bottom up, you're just not going to make it. Take the time, get your senior leaders on the page, do whatever it takes, whether you bring in someone like myself or the other folks that are on this call. It doesn't matter. You've got to get senior leaders to get it, to understand it, and help you move the ball in the right direction. Here's why. Senior leaders foster sustainability in a variety of ways. First, they've got to have an understanding, commitment to the basic principles and understanding. If they don't, they can't speak it. And when you speak it, they look at you like you got three heads. They also got to lead by example and be out there doing that observation and coaching. They've got to see the work, because the work tells you what the behaviors are and are they in alignment with your standards and expectation. And that includes your HOP principles and practices. The other is they've got to help you align the goals and incentives and put recognitions in place. They're the ones that set the goals for their work, for their direct reports, and they give that to the directs and so on. That has to be embedded into the process. You've got to set goals. And then they're the ones with the purse strings typically, right? You've got to have the resources to get this done. The other is you got to be communicating your successes. What successes are you having with your HOP implementation and integration? The other thing is they need to be out there seeing both the feedback associated with the positives and negatives and what the workers are saying, because that's where the rubber meets the road. And the last one here is integrating it into the strategic plan. Like I said, it can't be a bolt-on. It has to be built in. So when the company has a strategic plan, if HOP's not part of it, you're really going to be in trouble. So how do we do this? That's the first thing you got to start with is a win. And what I mean by that is when you roll out HOP, or if you try to restart it, let's say you've not had success, if you don't start with the win, it's going to impede your ability to have success. So that immediate success is a powerful tool. It garners support from all level of organizations. So what's worked for us? We have put out training that is cross-cutting. It's based on HOP principles, and it creates immediate results. And what I mean by that is, for example, we give some training, and I won't get into it here because I'm not trying to sell you on a particular one, but we deal with workers proceeding in the face of uncertainty. And I know all of you deal with that. I've done an accident investigation for many, many years. And despite something in front of these folks, they were uncertain. They didn't know. They proceeded in the face of uncertainty. We start with a training that addresses that very specifically and causes immediate success and a win for the organization. When you have that, you got wind in your sails, and management will support you for any further efforts. And I'm not saying this is the only potential for a win, but this is one that's worked for us. So when we start talking about O&C process and how that creates sustainability, let me be very specific. You immediately get behavior change because if you use a proven O&C process that we use as an example, it produces immediate positive behavior change for the organization. It gives management and leaders the ability to reinforce standards and expectation. If you don't get that, there's almost no chance you're going to have sustainability. And the other thing is when leaders are out there and they're watching work, they see what workers are faced with, and these system weaknesses, these organizational weaknesses start to show themselves. And management can say, I see that, I'm going to commit to you to address that. And when you do that, now you're walking the walk, and you're not just talking it, right? You've got to show folks that you care about this, you care about them, and enable work and remove the barriers. And the last thing is this coach to coach concept. This is the ability for management to observe a coach in the field and give them feedback on how well they're doing. You need to maintain high standards, and this is where that comes in. So the O&C video-based training process we use is a way to say, for the frontline workers, we have a training process that basically said, this is what's coming. You're going to see a new O&C process. And for senior leaders and management and frontline supervisors, we have very distinct training. It's in depth, it's on purpose in depth, and it provides the opportunity to test for understanding. We have a refresher. So let's say it's been 6 months, you took the training and like, man, I haven't done this in a while and I got to go out and do an OSC. They can take that refresher at any time so long as they took the initial course. That refreshes the key points and the process. The other thing is we use a field practical. We don't just let them take the video-based training. They have to get qualified in the field. And the way we found to be the most effective, efficient, and cost-effective is we train a subset of highly qualified folks maintaining their proficiency who go out and observe everybody else that's going to get qualified in O&C. They're the ones that test their ability, but we hold them to a high standard. We go out in the field with them for many days, and then they go out and do train the trainer, and they keep working with the staff to push this through. So we found that to be very helpful. So just a quick summary. Here's the 4 key points I wanted to leave you folks with, and I know we're running short on time, so I'll make sure I leave some time. Get the commitment from senior leaders, get their buy-in. Make sure that your training leads to an initial first win, no matter what that is. It has to change a behavior. It can't just be knowledge, folks. You need a behavior change associated with your training, because if you don't, what are you measuring? Leverage top video-based training guarantees flexibility, consistency, and rapid deployment. It gets those principles and practices that those are both important. You got to have both so they marry together and get them out there. The other thing is, we believe, and our experience has been this, that sustainability hinges on a proven O&C process, senior leaders reinforcing standards and expectations. So with that, I've got 5 minutes for questions. Hopefully you guys have some, and I'll open it up.
Yeah, Ron, thank you very much for a very insightful and interesting and energetic 55 minutes so far. So thank you. Let's see what kind of questions we have. And I think I'll turn to the chat box in just a second. I know earlier my wise and esteemed colleague Bob Latino had a question that I think he wanted to ask live. So Bob, I'll turn first to you as I take a look at the chat box and see what kind of questions we have in there.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. This has been very helpful. When looking at the training, this is not necessarily just related to HOP. It could be any training. This is a training, conventional in-class training versus a video-based alternative. So it's not
That's absolutely right.
related to HOP. And I by far would never be somebody would mistake me as a HOP expert, but from what I understand, that a lot of this is intended for training as opposed to consulting or facilitation. That if you're conducting a learning team, that would you consider the video-based alternative to being a like-for-like swap?
So yeah, I one of the things I am going to work on, and our team's going to work on, is how do we put together some good fundamental knowledge of what a learning team looks like. So let's say you're going to pull a learning team together, Bob, and quite often we got to at the front end provide some information, get everybody on the same page so that we're all understanding what a learning team is. And instead, you can say, hey, we're going to have a learning team tomorrow. Everybody needs to take this 30, 45 minutes, 1 hour training on what a learning team is, what we're trying to achieve. Then everybody comes in with the same mental model, and you're going to progress so much faster and so much better, because now everybody's on the same page before you even, and it gets you to work quicker, gives you more time to get that information. Big fan of learning teams, and I think you've got a great opportunity here in that realm to do that.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Thanks. And there were a couple more quick questions in the chat box, Ron. So one is from Brian about overcoming the stigma of video and computer-based training, and that to overcome that stigma or the effectiveness of it, is it important to customize training for a specific facility or operation or plan?
Yeah, so one of the things we've done is, just as a great example, it's about messaging. So if you think in terms of change management and a good messaging plan, you know, what is that going to look like? You've got to have senior leaders coming out in advance of this training saying, this is why we're doing it. This is the why behind the what. And what we typically do is we ask them to put a video together. And we're just currently doing this right now. We've deployed this to thousands of folks recently. And senior leaders, not A leaders, put together a video saying, hey, this is why we're behind this. Here's some events we recently have. This is why this is important. We need you to take this training. We need your buy-in. And they put that at the front end before folks even start to take it. So they start it with a messaging campaign, and then they have this embedded video. It's very powerful. It's very useful. Hopefully you guys use that as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. When you think about culture change and how to make things as effective as possible and the uptake, doing that kind of contracting and engagement and visibility from senior leaders, totally critical. So I appreciate that. So thank you. And one last question as we wrap up here, Ron. So Lauren asked, is anyone seeing any video training fatigue set in after working virtually for so long?
Yeah, so it's a great point. So what we allow, there's two parts to this. First off, that interaction cuts down on that fatigue, because like you just can't ramble on forever. You have to have that 5 to 7 minute, and that's a sweet spot. Just so you guys know, if you develop this yourself, 5 to 7 minutes is the learner's capability. The other part is the learner can stop at any point and just they can be on any point in the training. And when you come back, our software says, we're going to pick up right where you left off. That's extremely helpful. So quite often you get distracted, you got work come up, somebody comes in and talks to you, whatever it is, when you pause, it helps you come right back to it and you don't have to start all over. That's a very helpful part. So those two pieces to me are success pieces that we found.
Brilliant. So I'm going to do two quick things. First, Ron, do you have another 2 minutes for one more question?
Absolutely.
Okay, so with that though, knowing that probably a lot of people may have to join other meetings, I'm just sending a quick chat in the chat box, doing two things, asking everybody or saying thank you very much for taking the time and spending your energy during the last hour. It's been a great discussion so far. There's a link to the November webinar. So for those of you that are likely interested, please take a look at that. And then I'll turn to Tantally. And I totally apologize for butchering that name, but Tantally, your hand is raised. So what's your question or comment?
Hi, gents. So thank you for letting me join the session that we have today. So I just have a few questions. So we were rolling out our HOPE training, a HOPE initiative for more than 2 years. We were working with Bushane and Paradigm. So what I really see is we have really the challenge with sustainability, which is resistant to change. So I just wanted to have some ideas from you. How can we take that challenge out, resistant to change?
Yeah, I think one of the things we don't want to create in our line of work is a dependency on the consultant to always be there. This training is not going to occur unless we have X. And no offense to anybody that does what I do. I've done this for many, many years. But it's important that we create the sustainability and leave you with the ability to keep that effort going, regardless of us being there. And to me, the only way you do that is through video-based training. Unless somebody else has another solution, I'm open to hearing it if you have one, but we haven't found it. And that's actually why we went down this route.
So
you had another question?
Thank you for that. So I guess, yeah, I can think about it. VBT could be really helpful with it, which is we can use the storytelling and everything, but what I really see is there is a deeper structural challenge we have there with that resistance of changes. So thank you for your answer. Mm-hmm.
You bet. And so related kind of to your question and your last comment, one of the things we do, we embed particular case studies. So we give some generic ones that everybody can kind of relate to. And then we say, hey, if you had recent events, we put that case study and put it in context of whatever the learning is. So that folks go, oh, I get this. Had we done this, if I knew that, this may not have happened. And going down that route, I think people, too often on these lessons learned, we're challenged with how do you get lessons learned out in an effective way? And, when you got Charlie Brown's teacher telling you what the lessons learned is, womp, 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 it's not effective. So we build it in. We actually use video from the organization and we build in those lessons learned as part of our training. And we offer that as part of our semi-customization. You can do that as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Ron, thank you for taking your time and taking that extra few minutes, and I'm sure a very busy schedule to answer that last question, and I appreciate it. And thank you everybody for taking the time and sharing your questions and thoughts today. So Ron, any closing thoughts as we wrap up this hour and 5 minutes?
Yeah, you bet. I'm hoping that any of you folks, even if you don't use this, reach out to me, have a question. I'll support you with that answer. I'm not trying here to sell you stuff. Trust me, I'm extremely busy. We're doing good. We've got plenty of work. I just want to make sure that we have success with HOP. I know everybody that does what I do is committed to helping make that change. And if we do that and we work together, we learn from each other, which, this is a learning. And what I love about community health and organizational learning is that we share, and these webinars are a great way to do that. sharing is a key component. More than willing to share my experience, and if you've got experiences you want to share, please do, because I'd update this should I give this somewhere else some other time. If you need some presentation on this or some subset of this information, and you need some help, please don't hesitate. I'll give you the information you need so you can be successful, or I can help you as well. Either way, it doesn't matter to me.
Awesome. Thank you, Ron. And thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Happy